Jim Duke Radio Network.
Full start, just a second.
Okay, no problem.
Well, my intro just locked out on me, so we're going to go without an intro. And tonight, in this episode, William Ramsey joins us. He's a researcher and author of books such as Children of the Damned, Abomination, and Prophet of Evil, as well as has a YouTube channel, William Ramsey Investigates. My website is jimdukeperspective.com, and that's where you can listen to the show and listen to past podcast archives and articles and such. Well, let's get started. My guest tonight, William Ramsey. He's researched criminal cases such as the West Memphis 3 and Smiley Face Killers and their occult connections, as well as the influence of Aleister Crowley in society and in the Hollywood cabal. William, thank you very much for coming on the broadcast.
Jim, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Now, why don't you bring us up to date on your current research and how it all connects to the occult?
Well, it goes back to my original research into Crowley. I researched Crowley. I wrote a book, Prophet of Evil, about Crowley's influence upon the events of 9/11. And while I was researching that, I was trying to finish up a book about Crowley's influence on the 20th century. The title is Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow over Humanity, where I was looking through all these different individuals from around Crowley's era. Crowley lived from 1875, died in 1947, all the way up to the present. And when I was recording that or researching that, I kept seeing these smiley faces, primarily in reference to Alan Moore's The Watchmen series, where the comedian has smiley faces on his gun, on his label, all this stuff. But there's also blood on it. So I kept seeing this smiley face, and that kind of led me to this kind of what I thought was an urban legend, something that was referenced in the common culture as the smiley face killings, which, is supposedly this phenomenon, or was, in my mind back then, this phenomenon of young men going out at night in bars, primarily, at least according to the researchers, happening in the northwest of the United States. And so...
Now, didn't you say that this was not in the mainstream, so you kind of...
Right.
How to catch it? I mean, it had...
Well, I think I had heard an interview done before, and I had seen the smiley face, and there had been some videos online that I had seen. So I had a very vague kind of understanding. Well, what I started to do is research these smiley faces and the kind of meaning and the representation of the smiley face. And as I was researching, I kind of, was following cases. I had researched the primary book and the primary researchers. The book was titled Case Studies in Drowning Forensics. It was written by a professor by the name of Gilbertson and a police officer in New York by the name of Gannon. Gannon and his partner Duarte were both police officers who had seen certain cases that were similar. And this Gilbertson was a similar researcher who saw cases, I believe he was in Wisconsin. He's a criminal professor of criminal justice. And so they met up and wrote this book. It's a very detailed book. They cover 14 cases. And so I found that book and read it and looked at some of these old articles, these old interviews. There was an interview on Coast to Coast with a journalist by the name of Christy Peel. There was 2 hours of her discussing these cases. And so as I was researching, I ran into the chief researcher of my documentary, a documentary I put out in 2016, October of 2017, the title of which is The Smiley Face Killers, who is abducting, torturing, and murdering college-age men. And the researcher's name is Jim Smith. So we started following these cases, and then I started seeing these cases happen. So different than what Gannon and Gilbertson had said. I tried to reach out to them. I was never able to contact them. But I thought that they had dropped off the face of the earth. I really didn't know what they were up to. But really the first case that was of interest to me, where I saw a young man disappear and then be found in water, was Joey LaBute out of Columbus, Ohio. So really what these cases, what these researchers noticed was this pattern of young men out disappearing for a time where they should have been found, a large search happening, and then being found in water. So that was really the fundamental MO of what was known as the smiley face killers. The reason these murders got the name the smiley face killers is because at many of the cases, if not all, according to the research of Gilbertson and Gannon, they would find a spray painted smiley face.
Now, what's strange is they were considered athletic boys that were they were not people that could easily be abducted. It seems, so they probably had to be drugged, I'd imagine.
Well, that's a great point. I think they're all probably drugged. I think that most of them have been drugged. So that one of the themes that runs through the book by Gannon and Gilbertson is GHB. It's gamma hydroxybutyrate, which is endogenous to the human body, but in large doses, people become incapacitated. They lose their memory, and this GHB is present in many of the cases they researched.
And it seems that there were 30 to 40 cases across the country at first, and
right.
There's quite more than that, right?
Well, I think my research and Jim Smith's research, it's at least 200 to 300 worldwide. So what we expanded upon their research, and they may know this, they haven't publicized it again in Gilbertson, Duarte, but we've traced at least 200 of these types of murders of young men. It's actually happening in the UK with great frequency, and I've actually traced cases that happened in Germany, Netherlands, Denmark, Spain, Italy. There's possibly cases, and definitely one in Thailand. So this whole phenomenon of young men being stalked, abducted, and drugged is not exclusive to the Northwest. There's actually many cases in Florida, in Texas. There's been an outbreak in Austin. There's San Francisco, Seattle, Canada, Toronto. So it's same MO, like
correct. The smiley face.
Well, we found some smiley faces in some of the more recent cases, but not everywhere. Not with the kind of prevalence that Gannon and Gilbertson seem to have had, but definitely some. There was a Zach Mark case out of Boston, New York. There was a kid by the name of Hart in Providence, Rhode Island. Evidence of torture. Smiley face was found where his body was found. So there's been some, I wouldn't say, but definitely, some of these the cases that Gannon and Gilbertson covered, notorious. Like one was Todd Geib, and he was in Michigan, and they found a smiley face on his headstone when he died. So somebody had taken the time to go to where he had passed away and put a smiley face. There's a case out of Georgia, Naz Rahimi. There's a smiley face associated. So it is I couldn't discount it as a correlation to these deaths.
So in a lot of them, they are connected with a smiley face marking or
symbol.
Whatever.
Yeah, right. So exactly.
So that would and people would say, well, they're not. They might not be related. Especially around the country, how can they not be related on some except for if somebody's doing a copycat type of thing?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, there's a potential of some of these crimes being a copycat or somebody has learned the MO, but I believe the original cases and this phenomenon is learned somewhere through the internet or through FetLife or some type of community, even through a message board of people saying, oh, this is how you can do it. So I do believe that there's some form of communication between perpetrators in the kind of community that is targeting young men. And they're not financial crimes. Nobody's, debit card or credit card has been misplaced. There's been no calls to the family, but the reason why the men seem to be in this low kind of ideal, they seem to be athletic, but I think that people are attracted to them, men to men. So I believe that that's the primary motive for these abductions.
Is there any signs of rape on them or anything?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of the shortcomings of these crimes and one of the tricks of the actual crime is convincing authorities to think they're accidental drowning. So these guys drank too much and fell in water and drowned. And so I think these preliminary analyses is that it's an accidental drowning. So they're never really checked. And unfortunately, a lot of these autopsies are not publicly or available. So you don't know really what the injuries were. The FBI knows and some of these other things. And now we can talk about the FBI in this recent case of Dakota James, but there is the thing. Now I included the term torture in my documentary because the men seem to be being held for period of time, whether it's a day, 2 days. And in the case of a young man by the name of Dakota James in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he was missing for 40 days. And it's a very interesting case, and probably one of the primary cases that I studied in my documentary. And it's remarkable that the police called it an accidental drowning, because Gannon and Gilbertson are now in a 6-part series with Oxygen, covering some of these cases that they had covered in case studies in forensic drownings. Actually, the only case in that 6-part series that's not in case studies of forensic drownings is the Dakota James case. But the other 3 cases were McNeil out of New York, Homan, I believe in Wisconsin, Booth, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Wellsine, I believe Chicago, and Geib, who we talked about in Michigan. But the first part of the series was the case of Dakota James, where they involved a very well-known forensic pathologist, Cyril Wecht, who happens to be outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where the body of Dakota James was found. But they were able to get the autopsy report with some pictures, and it clearly showed, one, that the body of Dakota James was white, which after 40 days in water, the body actually decays quite a bit, even if it's cold. And they found that there were ligature marks around his neck that the original medical examiner did not disclose on the autopsy report. So the picture showed it, but the autopsy report did not. And the medical examiner was some guy, I think his name was Bang Zhu Yang. He's from China. He's a Chinese native. But I do think that that's indicative that many of these autopsy reports and medical examinations that took place of these victims are bungled. And it was a remarkable moment, I think, if for people who are researching these cases. There's a bunch of armchair researchers like me who are following these cases and making spreadsheets and things like that. But the Dakota James show on Oxygen, featuring Gilbertson, Gannon, Duarte, and another police officer by the name of Donovan, a New York police officer, was remarkable. And the good news, if people are interested, they can see it online on YouTube at the Oxygen YouTube channel. And there was a couple other things, not just the involvement of Cyril Wecht, but it was disclosed by the mother of Dakota James, her name is Pam James, that when she went to talk to the district attorney, both the FBI and the Secret Service were in that meeting to talk about it. So it was quite a shock to people who follow these cases that the government is involved in some form of oversight. The totality of which I don't know, but I'm pleased that they are actually seem to be following at least this one case. I don't know of all the cases, but yeah, it's a really remarkable Dakota James.
If the Secret Services is involved, and that's kind of strange. You know, what I have found is that sometimes these rituals, these things may be rituals that people are covering up, and sometimes they bring agencies in order to protect the perpetrators.
Well,
if they
that's
know
a
they're
great
high
point.
profile.
Right. Well, that's a great point. So if the FBI and Secret Service are they there to find justice, or are they for a cover-up, right?
Right. Now, nobody's got caught for any of these?
Well, it's a good question. There have been some people who have been arrested. When I talk in my documentary, I include 3 people who are like typology of possible offenders. Probably the most famous one, or somebody that I followed, was a fairly recent case of a man in London by the name of Stephen Port, whose victims fit the same profile of the smiley face killer victims. Younger men, littler on the skinnier side, not even athletic like medium build, but just a little skinnier than that. And he was GHBing them. He was abducting them, GHBing them. And then he would dump their bodies in a graveyard and falsify their deaths, like either a suicide or a fake note or something like that, or an overdose. And he actually got away with it for a long time. But he was one of these types of people who got caught. There was another man I included who was abducting men from bars late at night and literally tying them up. And there was another one who was a stone-cold occultist. His name was Peter Christopherson. He was a devotee of Aleister Crowley, believe it or not, who wrote something with Trent Reznor. He was actually a video producer, but he wrote something that I thought fit the exact MO of the crime, which was called Broken. It was a video that involved S&M, bondage, torture, and murder. And during that video, it actually starts off with a group of guys in a car, going down the street. It looked like they were just kind of cruising, and they happen upon a young man and start talking to him. That young man ends up in a chair, tortured, beat up, and murdered. So I did have some people. So the exact perpetrators of the crime caught? No. So there's definitely at least one serial killer out there preying on young men. No question. At least one.
And they can't get any information about the ones that did get caught of any connection they made or anything that they're involved in?
Well, that's a good question. You don't know. Like, you don't know. Stephen Port was definitely on all of these gay apps, right? He was on Grindr. I can't remember the names of the other ones, some that I don't even know. But he was on these apps. He was clearly in that community. And nobody knows how many people he might have killed, and people that he might have thrown in water too, right? So he just got busted for, I think, 4. And the same thing with this other guy's name was Lanphier. He was out very close to the epicenter of all the cases of Gannon and Gilbertson found. You get caught with 2, but who knows? He actually had 2 men tied up in his room, and it was odd too because he was married. I think he was he was outwardly heterosexual, but he had one of the young men escaped, and that's how they both got saved. But who knows how many Lanphier killed? I don't know. And so the connection is why do these people? And the question that I tried to answer is how do these people in disparate locations and jurisdictions? Why are these young men disappearing? And dying in water the same way, right?
Yeah, that's what's strange to me. That's what I wanted to get to. Is like,
very strange.
Is there some significance of the water? And is there, if the mafia did it, you'd know that it was some kind of target or hit,
right? Because
they knew something or they're trying to cover something. But this seems to be the same type of build of men, athletics and such, or kids or whatever, young men, and it seems to be the same thing, but it doesn't seem to be targeted hits. It seems to be more ritualistic.
Well, there's an element of that to it. There's this whole idea of binding, and Jacody James himself clearly tied up. And, so there might be some ritual element of water drowning. There's clearly, I found in my research, I saw this movie on Netflix called Kink, where fits this profile of these killings where they're taking a young man and torturing him in water, drowning him and stuff like that. So these things definitely happen. Whether they're like Peter Christopherson was a heavy-duty Crowley devotee and associated with some very strange people who also carry and wear the smiley face symbol, right? So the smiley face symbol shows up all over.
So is that? Yeah, well, it shows up in Walmart too.
Hollywood. Well, I mean, the thing is that it's like any other occult symbol. It has an external meaning, exoteric and esoteric, right?
Right, so, exactly. We talk about that. Yep, my listeners are very familiar with that.
You'll see the smiley face in contexts that are very strange, very Hollywood. In movies, there was a smiley face used at the very beginning of It. This kind of film that was very popular, a Stephen King movie. So you'll see it around. It was in the film Fight Club. So these guys are like involved in Operation Mayhem, putting smiley faces up in public places. So it's around it, yeah. And that, yeah, it's really remarkable how the usage, the primary usage, and my belief that the smiley face is a occult symbol that exemplifies this idea within the occult that the universe is a big joke. And it's actually stated by the same guy who plays Negan in The Walking Dead. He was the guy who played the comedian in The Watchmen, where he all just says it's a big joke. And he used to, the real sequences within Watchmen, he goes to Vietnam and just creates carnage and mayhem and laughs about it. He didn't care. It was a big joke. So that's why that symbol, at least in The Watchmen, has that blood stain on top of it. And that's my belief. So I believe it's used within that context. It actually goes back to William Burroughs. All these kind of creepy countercultural figures have used it. And it was very prominent in the very beginning of the rave scene, electronic music, etc.
That's very interesting because my wife often busts on me because I find offense with all the symbols that I see, and she tells everybody, "Oh, he has a problem with the smiley face," and I didn't until this case, but now I guess I do.
Well,
so she's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty remarkable that these symbols are being used. Now, there has been people who have analyzed these cases and discounted the phenomenon and they've stated that, the smiley face is ubiquitous. It's used everywhere, and that's true. However, it's not used, it's odd that it's used in all these other occult contexts, which they fail to recognize,
That's what people don't recognize. They don't realize that it's all about context. Like the Illuminates or the witches do not own a triangle. But when they have a triangle flash in a certain instance, especially deliberately with their hand gestures and stuff, it does have symbolism, meaning, symbolic meaning.
Absolutely.
But if you're seeing it on Sesame Street and they're talking about different shapes and they're talking about shapes, no, it probably wasn't deliberate. But people often miss that and say, you guys are paranoid. That every time you see a triangle doesn't mean them. But if you're watching a stage performance and you're seeing triangles being flashed in a stage performance, in unison with eyes and stuff, I mean, come on. How obviously blatant.
Well, a lot of those people who are discounted are actually, a lot of them I found are initiates. So they're trying to disabuse people from actually inquiring and asking too many questions. But there's so many uses of Crowley's numbers, 9311, 77, and all these other occult contexts that it's undeniable, especially the smiley face. There's a whole bunch of other, strange gestures, sign of silence, symbols, and things like that these guys use to communicate with each other. So the smiley face used within these contexts of these deaths may be a tag, an occult tag.
Do you want to talk about some of the symbolisms, or do you want to talk about the West Memphis incident? Does that tie in?
Well, not really. I mean, the only thing that West Memphis 3 was a case that involved, I got into that case because of the people involved, at least the chief person involved, Damien Eccles, was interested in Aleister Crowley. He actually said after his conviction, after his release in 2011, with the help of all these Hollywood-type figures, that he was put in jail because of his love for the knowledge of Aleister Crowley. He's flat out admitted it. So, there's all kinds of occultism that people deny associated with that case, but that it tying into the smiley face killers, I mean, there might be a little tie, but it's not overt.
Right, but it's tied in with the occult.
No question.
Aleister Crowley seems to be the common.
When you talked about when you talked about drowning, the three boys who were murdered, 8 years old, and the West Memphis 3 murders were drowned. 2 of them were tied up in rope and drowned, ritually drowned.
Oh, Now, there's a significant tie in there, a connection.
So there's all kinds of strange things these occultists do with water that the public doesn't really understand. I don't say I fully understand it because I'm not a practicing occultist, but I want to understand what they're thinking, why they do it.
Well, if we can stretch it a little bit, like when people were doing that ritual with the ice bucket ritual, they didn't realize that's sort of there was an occult baptism tie with that.
Interesting.
And water has significant with baptism, and when you're linking baptism or death or ritual with water, it's almost like a baptism of death, a sort of assimilated offering and burial, such. So to speak, it might have some kind of tie that way.
Well, that's what I've been told. I've heard people say that drowning in water is a mockery of the baptism, right? So it's totally anti-Christian. So I don't know. I've heard other things about the killing of the ideal young man, Antinous, in the Nile by Hadrian, the Roman emperor. So, I've heard offerings to Horus. I've heard all kinds of different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, I can't confirm it. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's definitely tied into occultism. If they're not following a ritual, they're definitely following a spirit that's kind of conducting them or causing them to be that mentally ill to be able to do these kind of things. So we often tie these things with either a deliberate sect of some kind that is directing these things, or individually, it doesn't matter because the same spirit's causing these people to repeat the same pattern.
Right.
So either way, that's occult tied with demonic spirits and such.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's possibly a thing. I mean, there's some cases you look into and you can tell these people got mixed up with the wrong crowd, and some are flat out witches, and then ended up dead. So it's a shame.
And didn't you say some celebrities have come to the aid and support of some of these people?
No, only for the West Memphis Three. So the West Memphis Three involved.
That's what I'm talking
right,
about.
So that's different. So the West Memphis Three is who was it? Johnny Depp, Margaret Cho, Eddie Vedder, Henry Rollins. So many came up and helped. Natalie Maines of the Dixie Chicks. So many of these people came in to help raise money. The amount of money raised for the release of the West Memphis Three was estimated to be between $10 and $20 million. So
why did they want them released? Why did they support their release?
Well, because they were released
convicted?
publicly. Well, they were convicted in 1994. And what happened was there were 3 documentaries that came out by HBO. I actually can pretty much trace the notion of their innocence to these documentaries, which I don't think didn't have an integrity towards the truth. They started blaming the step-parents, and so it was perceived in the public that there was an injustice done to these 3 guys. But all the evidence, there wasn't much physical evidence. There was a knife, but all of the in-court evidence pointed to them as the killers. Plus, after they were convicted in 94, one of the participants kept confessing over and over again. I think he confessed like 5-6 times. So, so they were convicted, and so once this kind of cause celebrity killers, this notion that they were innocent started through these HBO documentaries, all these people got on board and raised money from a whole bunch of people all over the country. 10, 20 million, got the best lawyers, and they were released on what's called an Alford plea. It allows somebody to plead guilty in court, but profess innocence publicly. And the Alford plea,
right.
Yeah, so it was a first-degree murder charge that they all pled to, and then they pled to agreed to time served and got out August 2011. So they've been out for almost 8 years now.
Is that including Eccles?
Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly, yes.
So like if they're they were kind of on their behalf of their innocence, but could they have been covering up for the ritual possibly? And
absolutely. Absolutely. There could have been other people there. So many have speculated, and I probably think that at that night that the boys were killed, there probably were other people there. There were a bunch of strange occurrences that happened. There was somebody was found at Bojangles, this kind of cafe nearby the scene of the crime, covered in blood and feces and mud. Just at the same time the 3 young boys were killed, there was another person reported to take a long taxi drive out of West Memphis, which is right across from Memphis, Tennessee. So there's all kinds of suspicious stuff that happened around the time of that. And there was actually other testimony or court statements that weren't in court, but statements to police by people from that city about somebody who they referred to. I think his name they called him Lucifer. So there seemed to have been another ringleader. And,
Oh, yeah, I know him.
Yeah, well, the Lucifer. But there was a nickname for that. But they talked about all these other occult books and all this other stuff. So very strange.
Yeah, so could they have been a result of... we study about groomed families that actually have these practitioners that they raise up and groom. Could they have been a family?
Absolutely. There's speculation that the chief guy, Damien Eccles, comes from an occult family. And mom lived in a trailer. I think she was on a Social Security, whatever, some kind of like public assistance for
welfare,
most of her life. The year that they were convicted, the mother and the sister of Damien Eccles were at a bonfire on the Mississippi where gunfire rang out, and somebody ended up dead. So there was all kinds of very peculiar stuff that was happening around those deaths. I think it was May 5th, 1993 is when the deaths happened.
So I wonder if like the celebrities got together to kind of protect them against the mind control of family rituals they know they've been under, because of course we know that a lot of celebrities are under the same, and maybe they're just trying to protect their innocence of being bred that way. I don't know. Well,
if you look into Johnny Depp, he's had very, very interesting...
He's a weird guy.
Yeah, absolutely. He's made very weird choices in films, and a lot of his films, if you look at The Ninth Gate, it's a stone cold kind of like satanic progress of a Satanist with all kinds of symbolism too, by the way. So he was in that with Roman Polanski was the director, and he's been in other stuff where he's making occult gestures, etc. So he was really, and there's videos on my YouTube channel, William Ramsey Investigates, showing those 2 guys together, where Depp is asking him questions. There's Also, stuff between a guy by the name of Dave Navarro, who's a guitar player with Damien Echols. So he has like a little bit of cachet with a lot of these celebrities. Convicted murder,
Dave
by the way.
Navarro's kind of weird.
Yeah, he's currently guilty. Currently he's on probation.
Oh,
they all are under probation. So, but yeah, if you look at the occultism and the tattoos of Damien Echols, Dave Navarro, Johnny Depp, a lot of them have this kind of secret meaning.
That's strange because it kind of ties in ritual and such, and the fact that they got off on probation. It reminds me of people like Michael Aquino, who has charges against him of pedophile and abuse, sexual abuse rituals, and he goes into courts and somehow mesmerizes the jury and gets off. Like, wow. This is crazy.
It's crazy stuff. Well, these guys. If you ask me, they should never have gotten out of jail, right?
That's what's strange is they get acquitted.
Well, they're not acquitted. They were convicted.
Yeah, they get on probation.
They're actually remarkable in the criminal justice system because they were found guilty in 1994 in two separate courts. So there were different juries because of Jesse Miss Kelly. The way that the law works, you're not supposed to be able to. They had to bifurcate the cases, but anyway. So 24 people convicted him, and then with the best attorneys in the country, they agreed to another first-degree murder conviction in 2011.
Yeah, I didn't mean to quit it.
Double convicts. Yeah, they're double convicts.
Well, I'm not a lawyer. Two of my faults are law and geography, so don't ask me questions about either, I guess. So this ties into the occult. It ties into Hollywood. How deep is the Hollywood occultism involved
with the smiley face killers?
Well, overall,
I would just say that
Crowley,
tons of Crowley devotees. I mean, it's hard. You can just throw a rock and probably hit somebody who's in a secret society or a cult. And a lot of their symbolism and a lot of their meanings are put into these Hollywood movies. So, you can watch so many of these different movies and see the 11s and see the symbolism. Yeah,
the 9s, the 11s, the 33s.
Right, 77s, 93s.
Incredible. Yeah. Now, 77 to Crowley, was that the number of false prophet or something?
I can't remember the number meaning. It references.
I think it's
definitely references Liber Oz. Liber Oz was his rights of man, where you can kill anybody that gets in your way. But it also references the self-perfected man and some other stuff.
Right.
Stuff. 77 Names of Satan, which references the 77 names of Satan in LaVey's Satanic Bible. Mm-hmm. One of which is, what's the name of it? I can't remember. They use that name, one of the names of Satan, in the show Stranger Things, which has they use all kinds of stuff like 77s, and there's a smiley face in the first season of Stranger Things. So there's a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah, I'm naive on shows too. I don't watch too much TV, so but I should be. Everybody's directing me to. If I went on all the watched all the shows people directed me to, I'd probably have 2 months worth of just sitting there and binging. But there's a lot of symbolism and stuff.
Yeah, no doubt.
Everything. And yeah, it's interesting how it's even in cartoons, and it's in our face. And what was I going to say about Eccles? Was he a Wiccan too?
Yes, Eccles? He had this book called Encyclopedia of Witchcraft. So he had this by a guy who was kind of a devotee of the original witch, a guy by the name of Gerald Gardner out of the UK. So,
yeah, he was the founder of Wiccan, right?
Right, so he was the founder of Wicca. And, so Damien Echols wanted that while he was in jail. And so it was pretty interesting that he seemed to be reading materials on all kinds of different subjects. They found it's an interesting kind of side story about the West Memphis Three, is that these guys, when they were in Arkansas, Damien Echols and his wife got storage lockers, and they forgot to pay for the storage lockers, so the storage locker was sold, and a guy by the name of Rob Horn in Arkansas bought it, And it just showed Damien Eccles' reading habits, and people would send him books, but there were tons of books on the occult and all kinds of different other materials. But in that, they found handwritten notes that said, I am the devil, not a devil, but the devil. So he wrote that about himself. And he also wrote about some BDSM kind of highly charged writings about him and his wife, involving ball gags and stuff like that. So
I see a lot of contradiction in that because, well, what I see a similarity first. The similarity is just like Aleister Crowley wanted to be known as the Beast,
right.
And to take on all essence of evil and personification. This guy wanted to be the devil, almost like the same type of thing. And then the contradiction is that if he was Wicca, from what I understand, Wicca's low-level witchcraft, and it's they don't believe in the devil.
My understanding, right? It's the horned one. They call it the horned god or something like that.
Yeah, but that's higher. Believe it or not, that's higher level. Lower level deny a whole deity altogether and say they're just nature worshippers and naked dancers
Interesting.
in the woods. Yeah,
well, that's not what happens at the higher levels, that's for sure.
No, it doesn't. And my grandmother used to tell us she was a witch around Halloween, and we thought it was a Halloween gag until on her funeral, a coven came in and danced around her coffin and then left.
Wow.
And I saw it, and other people didn't even see it.
Wow,
and
that's creepy.
And I found out she was a member of the Daughters of the Eastern Star, which tend to be wicked. And I don't think my grandmother sacrificed anyone. I don't even know if she believes in the deity of Lucifer or the devil. But that's low level. The higher levels, the adept levels, do believe in the Luciferian deity and the horned god, as you said. Right.
Well, it's interesting. Gerald Gardner got his OTO charter from Aleister Crowley. So we know that and some of his rituals were supposedly lifted from Crowley rituals, and Damien Eccles was a member of the OTO when he was in jail. So the OTO was actually writing about him. So Eccles not only was involved in Wicca, but also the OTO.
Oh, he was a member of the OTO too?
Correct. He might be a member now, but back then in jail, they said that they had like an OTO chaplain who went there, and the Arkansas chapter of the OTO has a library named after Damien Eccles. It's called the Damien Eccles Library from all the books that Damien Eccles had.
So this kid that was involved in a murder that was suspicious, and he pleaded guilty but got off on probation and such. And
he didn't plead guilty originally. He actually was found guilty of murder in 1994 and given the death penalty. So he was given the death penalty. It's a very hard case to follow because there were so many appeals, and so the appeal went to the Arkansas Supreme Court. The Arkansas Supreme Court validated. Nobody really talks about this. Arkansas Supreme Court, a totally different legal venue, found that everything in the lower court was okay. Let the death penalty stand. Then there was an appeal. There was actually a writ of certiorari to the Supreme Court of the United States, the number one court in the country. That writ was denied. Then there was an appeal about the death penalty, the punishment of the death penalty, that involved a 500-page psych report that was compiled by the defense. And you can kind of read snippets of that psych report on my YouTube channel, William Ramsey Investigates. But that psych report comes from 3 different times that Damien Eccles was in a mental institution. Once in Oregon, where he was involved in blood drinking and fighting and his love for the occult, and talking about how he was possessed by a woman who gave him information, and just all kinds of stuff. So he has quite the history. But yeah, he was found guilty in 1994, and then there was some legal maneuvering right at the end in 2011 that involved some excellent attorneys that he had. I mean, if you have $20 million, you can get the best attorney. The appellate attorney's name was a guy by the name of, from San Francisco, Dennis Reardon, who actually got Bobby Bonds off of, or was it Barry Bonds off of like his criminal trial. I think he got a misdemeanor or something like that. But
okay. Yeah. Well, my point is that he it's not that he was innocent or pled guilty. I mean, I thought I heard you say that, but the thing is that it's not some innocent kid. He was involved in rituals. He was involved in the OTO.
Oh, no, they said before they were arrested, there was testimony from multiple sources, and the confession of Jesse Misskelley said these guys would sacrifice dogs and eat the dogs. So they were involved at this place called Stone. Yeah, they were in this place they would call Stonehenge, which was an old cotton mill where they, would do all kinds of crazy stuff and bonfires and strange relationships. And Damien Echols had like a son already, I believe, or his girlfriend was pregnant. He was 18, older than the other two. But he was involved, and he had a tattoo of a pentagram on his chest with the point facing downward. So he was all over. And they both had, what did they have? Evil. They had evil tattooed into the knuckles of each one of their hands or something, or their left hands. So it's 666 on their shoes. So these guys
they were bad news right from the beginning. So
they were all kind of under probation. I believe Damien Echols was under probation before 1993 for breaking and entering charge, and then Jason Baldwin was, I think, stole something from Walmart or something like that. And Jesse Misskelley was known to always get in fights. So I think they were known to the police before the events.
What happened to the satanic worshipers who were just subtly in the backwoods and they don't bother anybody? No, just kidding. Crowley made his fame in kind of being overtly evil. Was he really as evil as he came out to be?
Crowley?
Absolutely. Because some defenders will say he wasn't a pedophile because he defended children, and they say his magic was basically, innocent. It wasn't. He just did it for like stage.
No. He wanted to be the chief of staff of Satan, and engage in all kinds of practice and try to create it anew. He actually created a kind of a satanic religion that involved all kinds of Western and Eastern knowledge. All with the
sexual
rituals, right, and all kinds of entities. He supposedly received the Book of the Law from Satan himself in 1904. So he would use the term I was, but he was trying to get in contact with Satan his whole life. Well, once he became an occultist or whatever.
Right.
So to say that...
he was trying to channel Satan.
Right. Well, he wrote poetry where he and Satan were one, and he would always talk about Satan. But he was... there's writings within some of his magical records where he and his wife were abusing infants. So, raping infants.
So they were, They try to cover all that up.
They don't talk about that. Well, this is what they do. They direct you to one statement within... Magic and Theory and Practice, where Crowley supposedly engaged in 250 sacrifices. And then they write that off as he was doing sexual masturbation or something like that.
Right, exactly.
But then what the problem with that is that they're relying on other people's ignorance of Crowley, because if you read Liber 66, it involves child sacrifice. The intro to the World's Tragedy, another of Crowley's books, the World's Tragedy, according to Crowley, is Jesus Christ. And he wants to step in and be the new savior of the world in the World's Tragedy. But that also involves child sacrifice. So it goes on. And the clan, nobody's there in the rituals, but there's tons of blood drinking. The rituals require blood drinking. And the cakes of light involve blood and all kinds of sexual fluids. So...
we have that in the spirit cooking rituals in Hollywood. By the way, that Marina Abramovic lives near me.
Really?
Her country home is
where?
She lives in Columbia. She's got a country home in Columbia County here, in the next county over from me. About
what state is that?
New York.
Gotcha. So she's up there. Well, do you know she's tied into this whole João of God, this guy in Brazil that she did a movie with him?
Wow.
Have you followed that guy?
No,
because he was actually getting women and creating. Became sexual slaves. They would have kids. He would sell the kids and murder the woman.
Wow.
Yeah,
and
really
she was
bad.
Involved in that?
Get this. So Podesta's involved with Pizzagate, right? This whole place, Comet Ping Pong and all that. Well, if you look at the real thing that kind of gave away this guy Elephantis was his Instagram accounts and all these weird people on his Instagram telling inside jokes, kill room, panda, all this weird stuff. All these really sexually charged terms. But a lot of those people, there's two people who were on his Instagram accounts, smiley faces. Smiley faces,
yeah, I go,
666, all that stuff.
I go by her house sometimes, and when I found out, I put it on Facebook that I found out where she lived, and the next night I had my window smashed in my car. I was wondering if that was connected.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. She's a very nasty person. She said she would go into her closet to contact spirits. So that's what. So she does
admit that. So it's beyond. It's beyond pig blood art.
Oh, way beyond. I think she's admitted that her art is for the public, and then there's private showings that are different, right?
And what's strange is she's denied that anything she does is ritual. She says for it to be a ritual isn't done in the public for art form. A ritual is done when it's in your own private home. But isn't this conducted in a country home?
Right.
That's what double talk. They admit it. And, Lady Gaga and, Beyonce and Jay-Z and these people have gone to her country home to do these rituals. And,
well,
it's not that she's 20 miles from me or
right.
So.
She's like another Damien Eccles, where you don't know what's going on, whether he's reading the tarot or doing these other things with people. But she's clearly connected, right? Super connected.
Connected with Holly. She's called the Hollywood Witch. That's what they dub her.
Right.
And then these guys in Hollywood do these rituals as well. They take on Crowley rituals in a lot of cases, don't they?
Interesting. Well, I've never been able to ascertain, whether they're perfect Crowley rituals, but there's so many Crowley
Not
references.
Perfect,
yeah. It's hard to say what's going on behind the closed doors, but, you go through, it's just like it pops up everywhere. If you look at, Bourdain's girlfriend, this girl, Asia Argento, if you look at her Instagram, it's all witch, 23, Illuminati, the Illuminatus trilogy by Philip K. Dick. Not Philip K. Dick, it's Robert Anton Wilson. So you see all these influences that permeate this culture. You there? I think we lost you. I lost you there for that last one.
Actually. Oh, okay. If not doing Aleister Crowley human sacrifices, at least doing sexual rituals influenced by the OTO and such.
Well, I would think so, yeah.
So the OTO definitely have. I know they have a governing overseeing of Hollywood and performers and such. That's
well,
that's what we're told.
You don't know the initiation that happens in Hollywood. You don't see how deep these guys get and all that stuff.
Well, we got some insiders that tell us pretty much. We've heard from different people that have been initiated, or let's say this, enticed. And I have a friend on. The first step is to give up something that is easy to give up, but hard to give up. In other words, you're not going to get a satanic sacrifice, but the first thing is you got to give up your family, or you got to you got to divorce your wife. And I know somebody that was the first step to prove that part of the loyalty, and he failed that first step, so he never went into it. Other people get involved, and they get kind of eyesight towards a pentagram in a room with somebody laying there, and they're doing a sacrifice. And we heard stories of somebody invited to the network parties, which are not more than network parties. They're actually initiations into rituals if you're willing to bear it. And if you wince at what's going on, you're not allowed to see anymore. But if you show interest, they will allow you to go in and have you be participant in the ritual. And that's kind of like a first step initiation. And once they do that, they draw you in, and they entice you. You can go further, but once you're already there, you cannot whistle blow because you were involved. That's how they kind of bind you.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
It's very
well. They have. I think I forgot what the name is. They're in the rituals for the Masons. They actually have a name of somebody whose job it is to watch out for other people, so that nobody can be bothered. I forgot the name of it, but they actually have like a titular figure whose job it is to keep other people out. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's probably the same in all these. All OTO came out of Freemasonry, all that stuff.
Crowley,
getting weird noises.
Even Helena Oh, yeah, I don't hear that much on this end. So, Helena Blavatsky was said to be a Mason, even though she was a female, and she enticed the Masons with theosophy and stuff.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Crowley considered her an influence. Yeah.
Yeah, and now he never got caught or accused of anything he did he?
Well, that's not really true. He was kicked out of France and kicked out of Italy, sometimes on odd charges, mostly espionage.
Oh, okay.
He was kicked out for espionage.
Yeah, well, but not convicted for sacrifices or any killings.
No, but he was close. I mean, he tried to give a speech on one of these French killers that his name was Gilles de Rais. Gilles de Retz is one of his names, but he supposedly killed, tortured, raped, and sacrificed 500 young boys in 16th century France. And so Crowley was it's actually called the Banned Lecture of Gilles de Rais. You can read it online. So Crowley was trying to give this and indicate that Gilles de Rais was a enviable character. So he was kicked out. He was not allowed to give that at Oxford and at what's the other one? So these two, elite colleges. He was actually forbidden from recruiting anybody from these two elite colleges in the UK.
And he had ties with the British intelligence, didn't he?
All the time, yeah. He was probably an intelligence asset from the very beginning. Really good book called Secret Agent 666 that talks about his time in New York as an intelligence asset, trying to make sure that the Germans did not have any sympathy with the United States, or the U.S. wasn't sympathetic with the Germans, but went to war against them. And so he actually writes about that. He wrote a 500-page biography in the early 30s, published in the early 30s, called Confessions, where he talks about specific names of people, historical figures who we know are intelligence assets. So he wrote for a German paper called The Fatherland. The other one was The International. So he was probably actually using his occultism and his travels as a cover as early as early 19th, 20th century, really, when he traveled to Russia it was called the Good Time Girls. He was supposedly a concert promoter, which was really out of character. But he was probably gathering information. But while he was in Russia, he really liked the Orthodox church services, and so he adapted their church services into his Gnostic Mass, which is very much influenced by Orthodox Christianity that he saw.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he was constantly moving, but he probably was doing so. His time in Italy, he was probably getting information. When he was in France, he was getting information. Then he spent time in Germany. Very fascinating. He was in Germany from 1930 to 34 as Hitler kind of came to power, and he was probably getting information there. And people wrote about him. There's famous.
This is strange.
Yeah.
That's so strange. He was tied in with Russia. He was tied in with British intelligence. He was tied in with Germany, and Hitler probably influenced Nazism with Thelema and their version of dual society.
He said after the war, after everything in 1945, he said, "Before Hitler, I am." So he compared himself to Hitler in a very blasphemous way, referencing the Bible.
That's just amazing how he kind of crossed all different cultures. He may have had an influence of a lot of nations in the 20th century.
Well, it's very interesting because a lot of Crowley's ideas, he really wasn't a political figure. He was a cultural figure, but Hitler was similar to Crowley, and I write about it in my book, Children of the Beast, about their similarities, similar statements that Hitler made that ape statements from the Book of the Law, which is, success is thy proof, which means, you just have success. It doesn't matter what you do. That's what, and they both Crowley and Hitler had that same kind of attitude.
Just like "do as thou wilt" has got a hidden meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you can see this kind of triumph of the individual will, this theme within Crowley. So Crowley's famous statement is, "Do what thy will shall be the whole of the law," an 11-syllable, 11-word statement. And here's Hitler right around that time of Crowley being in Germany. Leni Riefenstahl does a movie called Triumph of the Will, featuring Hitler coming out of the sky in a plane, this kind of symbolic figure coming out to save Germany, right? So, and Hitler believed in the individual will, and that was how he kind of conquered everything, was through his own willpower, right, all the way to the end. And Crowley was the same thing.
And then amazingly, he had influence in society through the entertainment field.
Absolutely.
And he was friends with Ian Fleming, from what I
right. Well, there
heard you say.
supposedly was communication between Fleming and Hitler, and they actually kind of were around the same orbit. Interestingly, there was this guy who was a painter. His name was Augustus John, and he actually did about four pictures of Crowley back in the day in pencil. And he was Crowley considered him his admirer. When Crowley wrote Confessions, he considered three people his ideal people. One was Augustus John. The other was a mountain climber whose name escapes me. And then another one was an adventurer. But Augustus John was a very remarkable person, but he had a child with Ian Fleming's mother. So Amaryllis Fleming, who was a half-sister of Ian Fleming, was by a close friend of Aleister Crowley. And so they all kind of knew each other. They actually knew each other through Crowley and Somerset Maugham, who wrote a book about Crowley that referenced Crowley in a very clumsy manner called The Magician, based upon Crowley when they had met in France. So Ian Fleming, when Rudolf Hess was sent probably by Hitler to the north of England on kind of a mission for peace, which they found out later that was probably Fleming who spoke German and lured Hess to the north of England to capture him. Once he was captured, there was writing from Crowley that exists today from Crowley to Fleming saying, I'm willing to share my services. And here's my references. I would like to interview Hess. So that thought was there. Whether that actually happened, nobody's seen any proof of that. But it's pretty clear that Fleming and Crowley were in contact, and that Fleming knew who Crowley was, and also that he modeled in the first of his books, Casino Royale, the criminal or the kind of antagonist of James Bond, Le Chiffre, is based upon Crowley.
So Ian Fleming was definitely influenced by Crowley.
Well, he knew a lot. I mean, he clearly knew the story of Crowley. Whether he was an occultist and putting these occult things is a whole other question. He was actually an intelligence agent who worked for the British Royal Navy. So he was like an adjunct to the head of the Royal Navy, which is probably the most important military arm of the British Empire back then, pre-war. So to say how much he knew, he actually came from a very wealthy banking family, Fleming. So he was a person of wealth and probably had the same opportunities Crowley did. He went to Eton twice. I mean, he went to Eton, which is probably the top school, and kind of rubbed shoulders with people who'd also been there. But he had won. Ian Fleming was an excellent athlete. I think he won Best Athlete of the Year twice in a row at Eton. So to say that he's an occultist is one thing. It's pretty clear he knew some of the fundamentals of what Crowley was up to.
He had to know some symbolism because 007 goes back to John Dee's insignia.
Right.
And the Secret Majesty, he was the cultist magician for the Queen.
Right. Queen
so he had to have some kind of, he had to have some significance. And I think Crowley did too. Didn't Crowley was influenced by John Dee?
I think so. I think he was influenced by all those people. I think Crowley's chief influence was a guy by the name of Eliphas Levi, who influenced a lot of Masonry. So, Crowley actually didn't think he was merely influenced by Eliphas Levi. He thought he was the reincarnation because Eliphas Levi died in 1875 and Crowley was born in 1875. So, I think that he, by his admission, but Crowley was influenced. There were so many other things going on that he was influenced by. He was influenced by Rosicrucianism. He was influenced by Theosophy. He was influenced by the Golden Dawn, another post-Mason magical fraternity, and then the OTO, which was actually a German secret society. He became its head in 1925, but it's really Germans.
And he was channeling spirits.
All the time, constantly channeling spirits.
So
always
he was influenced by them, too.
Right. So a lot of us, there's all kinds of scribblings and things that Crowley did trying to receive books, And if you look at the actual writing of the Book of the Law, it looks like a received book. He doesn't really change much, and he said he received it in Cairo in 1904 over 3 days, after doing a ritual. So, and there were other books like that. So there was he called them the the holy books, like a perverted. As usual, Crowley would pervert everything. Call Christians the Black Brotherhood, but yeah. So there was like the received holy books that he had, like 7 books of different stuff. So yeah, I was constantly trying to communicate with spirits.
I don't know if I have my tie in here, but some of his law of Thelema, was taken from previous teachings in 1700 occultism with associated with Benjamin Franklin and the Hellfire Club.
Hellfire Club, interesting.
Yeah, and there's a connection of someone there that actually had the motto "Do as thou wilt."
Oh, that's right. So yeah, that was actually,
I can't remember the names.
Yeah, it was Rabelais wrote.
Oh yeah. Okay.
The real Abbey of Thelema was French, so it was Rabelais, and then it was adopted by the guy who started the Hellfire Club, whose name escapes me. But yeah, so Crowley was in a line of these types of people.
He wanted to be badder and more evil than all these, using them as a sort of a model.
Well, the interesting thing about Crowley is he came from great wealth for that time and never had to work. So he was a son of privilege. And when he, in his confessions, when he was at, I can't even remember this now. My brain is going mush. But when he was in college, he said, "Here I am among the glories of the past, and I hope to be one of the glories of the future." So he said that from a very early age. He was gung-ho for it.
It's just amazing
Cambridge.
Okay. It's just amazing how I didn't know he had that much influence in the nations, interwoven into, influence of nations and then into society and entertainment,
right.
up to
Timothy Leary.
Timothy, I was going to say that.
Hanger,
Timothy Leary and
all these
Beatles and everything.
9/11.
Yeah.
So it's all there.
And so, maybe, if he isn't the beast or the Antichrist, he's an Antichrist.
No question.
And he's definitely was fueled by a Luciferian spirit that had an influence to change society one step closer to this beast system. He had to. Have that much influence.
I think that he wanted to create a new heaven and a new earth, based upon his religion. I don't think there's any question about that, So his idea was really an aristocratic government where the aristocrats governed over the sheep, the slaves shall serve, and he wanted to give the people the quiet wisdom of the cattle. That was his ideal. He was unashamedly a feudalistic kind of person. So.
Wow. Well, we see definitely symbolism in society, numerology, and calculations a lot influenced by occultism and the imagery to cast subliminal messages. It's a language, and
right.
Whether it means anything to us, it means something to them, and sometimes it helps us knowing some of their language so that we can decipher some of their plans.
Right.
Not that we're going to stop it. We figured out what their whole scheme is. But we can definitely hinder it, or at least reveal it or expose it. And sometimes they want it exposed because the closer they get to believe that there's nothing that can stop it, the more obvious they seem to become.
I agree.
Yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think we covered a lot.
Tell everybody how to find you and what you're working on.
I'm just working on some other stuff. You can find my books at Amazon. I've got 3 books there: Prophet of Evil, Abomination, and Children of the Beast. And look for my Vimeo movie to come back out, so it'll be on Vimeo. And the title again is The Smiley Face Killers, who is abducting, torturing, and murdering young men in the U.S. and U.K.
All right, William, thank you for joining us. And I didn't know all about the smiley face killers, the inside stuff, and the connections there.
Jim, thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night.
And yep, you too. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
My website is Jim Duke Perspective, and that's